We were studying Genesis 6th chapter last week. And you asked me a question about the text of the Bible. The best text that I think to use if you're not going to study Greek and Hebrew is the New American Standard or the Amplified Bible. The Amplified Bible is not a direct translation. It is an explained translation. It tells you what it says from the original languages, and it kind of develops it just a little bit. And it's very repetitive. If you go and read like a psalm or something, it'll just keep saying the same thing over and over again. Well, in Hebrew it is. And it's emphasizing that because most of the psalms were songs. And a song says the same thing over and over again, doesn't it? A song?
The chorus.
All right. The chorus does. So there is what you get. And the New American, or the Amplified Bible does that.
Is the explanation accurate?
Fairly accurate. The most accurate Bible that I ever saw was the Sacred Name Bible. And it was more accurate with the translations of the Hebrew names in the Old Testament. And it's hard to find. I gave away a whole lot. Your wife may have one, Bill. I don't know. It's a little old blue Bible, just a paperback Bible about that thick, called the Sacred Name Bible. There was now people will take Bibles and they'll make a cult around it. Now there was a Seventh-day Adventist cult that was formed around that Sacred Name Bible. Now they came out, one of the people that was part of that came out when I lived in Valley Acres, and the woman would interview me over and over and over again. I mean, she would just ask me, she said, what does this name mean? What does it say here in Hebrew and everything? And she knew Hebrew, but she didn't know deep Hebrew. A lot of people teach Hebrew. We have a girl here in our class, Leanne Knudsen, in our church, that teaches the beginning Hebrew. And I got in her class, well, I was sitting in the class one day, and she started writing Hebrew up on the wall up there, and I started reading the Hebrew, and she said, you're reading it unpointed. Well, I didn't know what it means. I didn't know what Bible verse she was writing and stuff like that. And then she said, how much Hebrew did you have? I said, 6 years. I said, all grammar and reading. And I said, I had 3 years of grammar and 3 years of reading and research. Wow, she said, I didn't have any. I mean, she was teaching basically conversational Hebrew. Deep Hebrew in the grammar. Now that's what I'm teaching you in this class right now. We went in here, when we went to the book of Genesis, when we start seeing this stuff, the things that I'm bringing out to you, you would only get that in a class 20, 30 years ago that taught you Hebrew, advanced reading and research. They don't teach it now that I know of. I'm the only one still doing that. There aren't any teachers, for one thing. All of us have died. All of my teachers are dead. All right? Hardly anybody. Now, the translations of the Bible. The King James Bible. For the first 200 years, Baptists wouldn't have had that thing in a church house after it was made. When they came out with the King James Version of the Bible, if you read the beginning of it, it literally denounced Baptist, and it denounced the Catholic Church. King James, now we're going to get into that a little down in the church age. We're going to get into this a little bit. But when King James decided to have a Bible, the Church of England people have a Bible. England was divided between Protestants, and that was the Protestant was the Anglican Church, and the Catholics. See, England had originally been Catholic, like everybody else. Okay, but there were true Baptists and true churches all in the world all the time. That's what we're studying in this class later on. Well, King James was losing some of his people to the Protestants. And then he had this Baptist problem. To the Catholics, back to the Catholic Church. Then he had this Baptist problem. Well, the Baptists had always taught from Greek and Hebrew. And they did have translations. Their pastors were educated. Many of the Baptist pastors in the early days were executed and burned at the stake as witches because they could read and write and things in a way that the common man could not do. Well, King James wanted a Bible for his people to keep them in the Church of England. The Catholic Church did not use the Bible at all. All of their masses or church services were in Latin.
The Vulgate?
The Latin Vulgate.
written by Origen?
No. It was Jerome.
No.
Jerome. All right. And anyway, they took the Bible out of the hands of the people and out of the minds of the people, and that's what started the Dark Ages. Okay? We're going to get into this a little bit further on down the line, but I'm trying to answer your question. Well, he had the Bible translated. He did not have it translated from good manuscripts. There were very few good manuscripts left in the world at that time that anybody looked at or studied. So he used the Latin Vulgate to translate the King James. But the Latin Vulgate had been translated into Greek. It went from Greek originally into Latin, and then from Latin back into Greek, and then from that Greek into the King James English. That's a long step from the original language. Here we have some unorganized Greek manuscripts. Back in here we have Jerome. All right? And then Jerome, he translates this, and he did not discriminate. If one manuscript had a reading in it, he didn't fool around with it. He just put everything he saw in there. And when he wrote it, he says, I didn't mean for this to be accurate at all, because I didn't try to find out what's somebody's notes and what was originally in the manuscripts, the Bible. Okay? He didn't try to discriminate what was really there and what somebody had written in. Okay? He just wrote it. Well, he wrote the Latin Vulgate. Okay? And then, back about 1500 and something, in the 1500s, they decided to make a Greek New Testament. Okay? So they took the Latin Vulgate. They didn't take this at all. Nobody had gathered up any manuscripts at all. They had been unused. So they decided to make this Textus Stephanus. This is what we call Stephen's text, or the received text. Okay? Now they marketed this text that they printed as a received text that God had given to man. This is a real Bible. All right, this is Textus Stephanus.
What year did Jerome translate the...
This was about 400 A.D. Okay? Now, we have 3 complete Bibles. The Codex Vaticanus, Alexandrinus, and Alexandrinus. Okay? 3 manuscripts that in about 300 A.D., well, right in the early part of 300 A.D., Constantine the Great had 50 copies of the whole Bible made in Greek. Okay? He had 50 copies. Of those 50 copies, 3 of them we have complete left. One of them is the Alexandrinus, the other is the Vaticanus, and then is the Sinaiticus, Codex of Sinaiticus. Those are 3 of them. Those are 3 remaining manuscripts, and they go way back here. Okay? Way back over here. Right here, they weren't even fooling around with them. Russia had one of them. I think it was the Alexandrinus. Well, they translated this Textus Stephanus, and they were in 1611, when King James translated his Bible, he just translated from here into English. All right?
Textus Stephanus was in Greek?
Yeah.
From the Latin?
From the Latin.
Okay.
So it went from Greek to Latin and back to Greek. Now, the Textus Stephanus, if you look at that in Latin, especially in the book of Revelation, it's gobbledygook. It makes no sense at all. What Jerome had put in there, first of all, they didn't believe in the book of Revelation at all. They didn't think much of it. And when they started translating it was a mess from these. But from the old manuscripts, it's fine. It's what you have today. Okay? Anyway, then we have the 1611, we have the English Bible. That's the history of King James. If you have New American Standard, if you have New International Version, you go from the original Greek manuscripts, all right, straight to English. All right? That's what you have. Now tell me which one would be more accurate, logically. The American Standard Version. All of this came from the Greek manuscripts, the original Greek
The
manuscripts.
New American Standard does.
New American Standard. All of them come from there. The rest of them come over here. That's a long way around the mountain.
Which text did the NASB come from?
New American Standard,
Yeah, did it come from the Nestle Island or from
Nestle Island. All right. Now, no one with any education at all would translate and make a copy of a New Testament, a translation of the New Testament from Textus Stephanus, unless you were illiterate. Well, to learn Greek, you couldn't be illiterate, could you? And you probably would know something about this. The people that propagate King James Version today in a lot of little Baptist churches, they are doing it with pure ignorance. If there's no education behind it. That's a English Bible. That is a Church of England Bible. That is not a Baptist Bible. Now it's the Word of God, according to some people.
Mormons
The King James Version. All right. First of all, what did the Church of England believe? They believed in what? Baptismal regeneration, didn't they? They believed that you're baptized for the remission of sins. All right, Acts 2:38 is translated exactly like they wanted it translated. The word baptized is not a translation. You know why it's not a translation?
It's a Greek word.
It's a Greek word, and it means to immerse. Our Latin word immerse comes from mergio. If the Greeks wanted to if Jesus had wanted to sprinkle you for baptism, he would have used the word rantizo. See there, and I want to tell you, she's never studied Greek. If he wanted to pour on you, he would have used the Greek word what? Nipto. All right. And if he wanted to dip you, he would have used the word baptizo. All right. There you've got it. They translated it exactly the way they wanted it translated. They believed in what is known as the universal church idea, that everybody that is saved is in the church. All right? And so they translated the word church instead of assembly. All right? Which is ecclesia. We're going to get into all of that later.
I'm going to ask, okay, Jesus didn't speak Hebrew, I assume, but from what I got, he spoke Aramaic. And then is that the form of Hebrew?
No, he did not speak Aramaic. He did speak Aramaic. He spoke Hebrew also, but his common everyday words were in Greek.
Was it Greek?
Because everybody spoke Greek everywhere. Greek, Koine Greek means universal language is what it means. That Koine means everyday, common, the common language. Okay?
When Jesus and Paul were preaching in the synagogues,
Yes.
from the scriptures, it was the Septuagint?
They were using the Septuagint. When Jesus said, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani, on the cross of Calvary, they thought that he was calling for Elijah, because they didn't understand the Hebrew. They didn't use the Hebrews at that time. I don't care what Hebrews say today. I mean, they'll say it today. We were speaking Hebrew back then. Baloney. Baloney. If you historically study this, at the time that Jesus was on the earth, very few people spoke Hebrew. Paul's family spoke Hebrew. He was a Hebrew of Hebrews. That's what you call a Hebrew of Hebrews. A Hebrew of Hebrews. Pharisees didn't even speak Hebrew. He was a Hebrew of Pharisees, a Pharisee of Pharisees. He was a zealot of the Pharisees, which was the elite Pharisees. Okay, he was an elite Pharisee. He did speak Hebrew. He knew Hebrew. Jesus spoke some Hebrew, very little. He spoke some Aramaic. Where he spoke the Aramaic, it is in Talitha Kumei. That's Aramaic. And the Greek doesn't say "made arise." He says Talitha Kumei, and he's using he spoke to her in Aramaic. Every place that Jesus used Aramaic, it is quoted from Greek into Aramaic. All right. Really good. And the movie, The Passion, came out when he was speaking Aramaic. That's baloney. That's historically inaccurate. Now, the Roman Church believes that.
No, Gibson's Catholic.
Well, the Roman Church is Catholicism.
So
all right, they believe that.
That's where people got the idea that he spoke.
Yeah, and that's where everybody's got the idea that Jesus was speaking Aramaic. No, he wasn't speaking Aramaic. Yes, he did speak Aramaic occasionally. All right, very seldom. To people in a certain situation, he spoke Aramaic, where it dealt with them in that language. It meant something, okay? But everything else is Greek. In the book of Revelation that we're studying Sunday morning, there's so many Hebraisms in the book of Revelation. The book of Revelation is written in Greek, but it has Hebrew syntax and Hebrew figure of speeches in that thing, where it talks about, and they reigned and ruled with Christ 1,000 years. In Hebrew, the tense is future perfect. They have reigned and ruled with Him 1,000 years. It's speaking of that as if it already happened. It's future perfect. And it comes over into Greek.
But did John speak Hebrew?
Yes, John did. John spoke
That's
Hebrew.
why all his writings come out that way.
No.
No?
He has some of the best in 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John, and the Gospel according to John is some of the best Greek, basic Greek that you could. He used Hebrew figures of speech in it, but it's some of the best basic Greek that you could study from. I always used to teach my students, if we did anything in the first 2 years of Greek, we used the Gospel of John or 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John, because it's very simple Greek. All right, some Luke and the Book of Acts and the Book of Hebrews and stuff. Now this is advanced Greek, okay, and even James that we're studying.
So
He throws some real.
why did John use so many Hebraisms? Is it because for emphasis or for...
John 1:1, because he wanted them to understand who the Messiah was. In the book of Revelation, because the tribulation period is coming upon whom? For what reason? It's the whole period. The reason for it is to bring Israel back to God. So it's a Hebrew book. It's a Hebrew book. It's written in Greek, but it's got a Hebrew state of mind in it. All right. I know that you can't ask anybody else the questions you're asking me on this kind of stuff. I don't know whether anybody else around here can tell you those things. All right, yes, brother.
Okay. Jesus and his family spoke Greek, so he was. I was told, I read somewhere, his family never called him Jesus because that was Greek. They called him which was the Greek form of Joshua.
Joshua, that was his name. Jesus is something that came in much later. Joshua.
He was called Joshua.
Joshua, yeah. That was his name, Joshua. The name Jude is Judah. King James really didn't have his act together at all. Those translators were not very good. They've got, in the New Testament, they got Elijah. In the Old Testament is Elias. They didn't even quote the right prophets in King James. Sometimes it would quote the wrong prophet. It would be Zechariah instead of Elijah that they were quoting.
How come the NASB didn't carry that forward from the original text?
Because people trusted the King James so much, if you put down Joshua instead of Jesus, they'd say, "What's going on here?"
They'd be lost.
They'd be lost, and they'd think it was wrong too. And I've showed you a lot of times in the classes. This is church history. It is church history what I'm teaching tonight about this. This is the history of the Bible. All right.
Because Jesus is just the Greek version of Yeshua. Of Jesus.
Jesus is English. Jesus is English. Jesus in Greek is Jesus.
Okay.
Jesus in Spanish is Jesus. All right. And it should have been Joshua, and they did. They knew how to spell Joshua. They just did it wrong. All right. Well, anyway, all of that said and done, Jesus, in his common rounds, used Greek, Koine Greek. If he spoke to somebody in some special way, he spoke to that maid and said, "Talitha Kume," maid arise. He spoke it in Hebrew. On the cross, on the cross of Calvary, when he said, "Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani," he quoted Psalm 22 and verse 1 in Hebrew. All right, simple. He quoted the psalm, and this is what he was supposed to say for 800 years, almost 1,000 years. They had been reading Psalm 22 and verse 1. Now they see it fulfilled. So he used Hebrew for a very specific reason, didn't he? All right. You have anything, Brother Bill? You got any wild ideas? Nothing? No questions that you have? All right. I'm glad that you asked me these questions. I'll try to answer them for you.
When you said that manuscript was that NASB came from, I just wanted to write.
The Nessel Island text. Now, the Nessel Island text. This goes back in history again. Westcott and Hort started studying the Bible. Now, the people that believe in King James are going to tell that Westcott and Hort's terrible, Bruce Metzger terrible, Nessel Island were all these were all terrible people. They got to try to do away with their scholarship somehow. And they'll tell you this. This is what you're going to read in all their writings, okay? But Westcott and Hort, they decided, you know what? We've got some manuscripts, some Greek manuscripts. Let's find out. Here we got this bogus Greek manuscript here. They knew this. Everybody that was a scholar knew this thing was this was baloney, okay? This Textus Receptus. Let's go back and try to find as many of the original manuscripts as we can. Let's go back and we'll start comparing them. And these guys were scholars, okay? So they started comparing them. And so they put together what was known as the Westcott and Hort Greek text. Baptists believed that and preached from that for years. All right? I mean, this. If you go back to J.R. Graves, John A. Broadus, A.T. Robertson, Ben Bogard, J. Lewis Guthrie, and all of them, they had one text in those days, and that was the Westcott and Hort text. Okay? Well, they did some scientific studies. Well, now the Nestle Allen and the United Bible Society, there was a whole lot of different ones that started doing these texts. So they started really finding every manuscript in the world they could find and comparing them. And they found families of manuscripts. They found out where this bogus little saying was in here. And they started really scientifically evaluating the manuscripts. And what you have when they did that, it goes right back, as far as we know, to the original manuscript that Paul signed, that Peter signed, and James signed, and that's what you call the Nestle Allen. The New American Standard, any modern translation is going to come from those good manuscripts, not this thing. All right? Now, if you're a scholar, you know anything about Greek, but so much of this is being taught in seminaries today, even from those books that they have circulated. Just because you read something in a book doesn't make it so. Just because somebody preaches it from a pulpit doesn't mean it's so. If I preach something to you, and you have a question with it, you go study it. You go trace it. You chase it down. Every historian, like I told you, this book, The History of the Baptists by John P. Christian, you've been to my home. I've got a history library, and I lost a lot of it. But the one I have is 4 feet wide and 7 feet tall, plus a few other books now and then, here and there. But it's full of histories. I don't believe just any history there that says anything. I've got some real rare histories and stuff. But I don't believe it just because this guy said it. I go back and chase his sources. Then you go back and see if he quoted them right. I have read a lot of Baptist histories that misquoted a historian. They'll just quote one piece of it, one bit here. Another guy that was pretty good in this is this. Now I'm going to tell you, many Southern Baptists today will not accept this book. The reason why is they don't believe this anymore. Many have departed from the faith. As simple as that. They don't believe in the history of Baptist churches. I'm a Baptist because I am convicted that that's where I ought to be. Otherwise I'd be in the Church of Christ or some other place. But I believe that our history was correct. That we have. And how I became a Baptist, I came out of Pentecostalism. That's where I came from. And I wanted, when I started studying the Bible, after I was saved and everything, I wanted to understand which church is closest to what this thing is teaching. First of all, I found that King James wasn't really the original language. So I started studying some Greek and some Hebrew. And the more I studied, and the more I studied the Bible, the more I studied history, I found out Baptists were the closest thing to what was back there at the Sea of Galilee when Jesus started calling it out. Well, let's get into church history now and into the Bible, all right? And we're in the 6th chapter of the book of Genesis now, all right? Why the flood was caused. God told them to do good and offer blood sacrifice, didn't he? What did they do? They excelled in wickedness. Excelled in it. There's a Greek word, when you excel in wickedness, is pornerios. Alright? That is twisted and perversion, and you really have to practice sin to do that one. That's a real good thing, okay? Well, they were wicked. Another thing, many of the rabbis in history, and I'm telling you things that you're not going to get in every class, because I've studied a lot of this stuff. When you study Greek and Hebrew and you start studying Bible texts, you have to go chase all them rabbits. And you have to study through history, and if you go through this book or that book. I translated the book of Genesis about 2 times in Hebrew. And I'm going to tell you something. If you translate the book of Genesis from Hebrew, you're going to learn something. You're going to learn the things I've been telling you. Now, you've only been exposed to it. You're going to know something for many years before you ever understand it. My teachers used to tell me, boys, I want you to put this underneath your hat and just keep it there. Maybe 20 years from now you'll understand what I'm teaching. You'll know that you believe this, but you will understand why you believe this. And one of those things is what I taught you here last week, where it was, sin does not come through the woman, it comes from the man. And he got that in Hebrew. Every English translation, I don't know whether you ever heard that taught anyplace else, ever. Okay? But that came from Hebrew. All right? That's true. It's scientifically true. It's medically true and everything else, but it came from the Bible. I didn't invent it. Okay? Well, if the rabbis were correct, if the book of Enoch is correct, one of the reasons why God destroyed the earth with flood was to kill all of those monstrosities in 6 and 1, 2, and 3. Read to me again in Genesis, the 6th chapter. Someone go to the book of Genesis. All right, have you got it there?
What verse?
6, 1, 2, 3.
And it came to pass, when men began to multiply on the faces of the earth, and the daughters were born unto them, that the fallen angels saw the daughters of men, that they were...
Well, no, that's B'nai Elohim, the sons of God. All right? Now, this could be the... All right, that could be the angels. All right? Saw that the daughters of men. This is what the rabbis taught.
That they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. And the Lord said, My spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he also is flesh. Yet his days shall be 120 years.
So he gave them 120 years to repent. Now, people have taken that out of context and say that's a lifetime of man. You've got 120 years. No, they were going to have 120 years. Noah preached for another 120 years. Actually, Enoch had preached for 300 years before that, preaching the same thing that Noah preached. Okay? And there was one boy called Methuselah that was named. Did I tell you this last week? Methuselah. Methuselah is also Hebrew. What does Methuselah mean? Now I'm telling you, this wasn't Noah that named him. You go back and look at the lineage of them. Methuselah. When the name Methuselah is a weird name, you would never name your child this, would you? Methuselah was also the oldest person in the Bible. How long did he live? 969 years. Why did he live 969 years? Tell me.
I would say he's found favor with God.
No, doesn't have anything to do with it. When you know what his name means, then you know why he lived 969 years. His name means, when he is dead, it shall come to pass.
So he died in the flood?
The year he died, the flood came. When he is dead, it shall come to pass. Now, Noah knew all about this. Noah, how long did Noah build the ark?
150 years.
120 years. This is the 120 years, all right? Noah preached all the time he was building, okay? And his boys were helping him also. Now, all this time, everybody's watching Methuselah ever since he's born. Because Enoch was preaching that when this boy died, the flood was coming. The judgment was coming. Before Noah ever preached the judgment of God upon the world, the wickedness that was going to take place, Enoch had already done it for 300 years. Okay? That's a long time. They had already named this boy, when he's dead, it shall come to pass. The boy's already in the world when Noah begins to build the ark. All right? And his name is, when he's dead, it shall come to pass. Or when he dies, it shall come to pass. All right? Now, did you learn something new about that? That ought to be exciting. That's something that you don't just get anywhere. All right? But it comes from Hebrew also. When he's dead, it shall come to pass. Well, if these monstrosities on the earth, and talks about the Nephilim. Now, what does Nephilim mean?
Fallen ones?
Fallen ones. That's what it means, fallen ones. Now, why would they be called fallen ones if they weren't indeed from these fallen angels? Just asking you a question. All right? Now, there's another line I told you about that believes that the faith line married into the ungodly ones, and they had some ungodly people. All right? But, if indeed the reason why God was going to destroy the earth is because they became wicked, even at this time, the book of Enoch says that these Nephilim began to eat animal flesh. God did not give them animal flesh to eat. Animals were not afraid of man. They weren't even afraid of each other at this time. Everybody got along fine. They lived like they will in the millennial reign that we talked about this morning. Over here. This is the way. Animals will all live together. Nobody's going to be killing and eating anybody, okay? Everybody's going to be happy again. We won't get to go fishing over there, I don't think, Brother Mike. Catching a lingcod. Well, everybody's going to be all right there, and that's what was supposed to be like over here. But it says that these monstrosities, these Nephilim, began to eat people also. They began cannibalism, and they began to eat meat. And some of them were really big.
And this is from the book of Enoch.
Yeah, this is from the book of Enoch, and this is also from the rabbinical writings. Okay, it's not only but the rabbinical writings got their idea from the book of Enoch. Now, the Hebrews always believed that the book of Enoch was written by the seventh man from Adam, which was Enoch. All right? Now, someplace, I've got all of those written down. I'll try to give those to you. If I can find it in my Bible here real quick. Just hold on for a minute. If I can find it. I have it written down and even copied it someplace and handed it out a few times. All right, I found it here. Put this out of the way for a moment. Glad I'm not on camera. Adam. The meaning in Hebrew means earthy. Earthy, red or earthy. Okay? The name Zeth. Remember we studied that. What does Zeth mean? We studied that. You guys, this is the test night. What does Zeth mean? Come on now, what does Zeth mean? Substitute. Substitute. Who did he replace? Remember, I told you about it. Remember Cain? All right, he replaced Cain. He didn't replace Abel. Cain was the heir, not Abel. Abel was never the heir. Zeth replaced Cain because he made himself ineligible. Now the word Zeth, now his son was called Enos. Enos means dying. All right? Canaan means purchaser or redeemer. All right? Canaan. And then we have Mahalalel. Mahalalel means the splendor of God. And then we have Jared. And that means poured out or to descend. And then Jared named his son Enoch. The seventh man from Adam. Enoch means teacher. Enoch named his son what? What did Enoch name his son? Come on, what was it we just talked about? Methuselah. When he is dead, it shall come to pass. He did that prophetically. God had told him that when this boy died, the year he died, this is when judgment was coming. Then he named his son Lamech. All right, which means King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And then Lamech named his son Noah. This is the Noah that we're talking about. All right, which means peace and safety. All right. Now, does that mean a little bit more to you than before? Those names, the first 10 names basically talk about the coming of Christ too. That He's our second Adam. And all those, He was the splendor of God. All of this, He was the dying one. In Christ we have peace and safety. All right? Now, the failure was wickedness. All the wickedness that they brought upon the earth. And then the judgment was the universal flood. That's when the flood took place. So all the people that lived at this period of time were killed except for 9 people. Only 9 people lived. Who were they?
Noah, his wife, 3 sons, and 3 wives. That's it.
That's 8. Who's the 9th one?
The grandchild.
Who's the 9th one? Come on, David. No. Elijah wasn't born yet. Who is the one that didn't die? Who was one of the examples? Enoch. All right. Enoch didn't die, did he? All right. He went right straight up to be with God. All right. There we go.
But he was on the ark then?
No. He was taken up before the ark. He was taken up because he's a type of the rapture. All right. He's a type of the rapture. Now, God gives us 2 examples of something before it is ever law or before we can believe it. So who are the 2 people that were raptured in the Old Testament?
Elijah.
Enoch and Elijah. Enoch right before the judgment, wasn't he? Just look at this now, right before the judgment. Now the rapture comes just before the tribulation period, doesn't it? And the Noah's Ark was a type of the second coming of the Son of Man when he comes for his people and judgment is poured out on the earth. A lot of people are going to die right here. A lot of people died right there too. Do you see how that? Do you understand the second coming just a little bit better because of what happened? The Bible repeats itself over and over and over again. Repetition is the best way to teach something. Okay? Now, let's get back over here. Judgment came, universal flood came, all these people wiped out. Then they came out of the ark, and God changed everything. All right? Changed everything. Outside of that ark, when they got out of the ark, they had a sacrifice. God probably put all those animals in hibernation on the ark, by the way. I don't think they weren't eating each other and killing each other at all. So there wasn't any of that. The lions ate straw just like the cows did and everybody else. But God can hypnotize. Remember, we learned that word before. He can hypnotize something and put it in suspended animation. Hypnos means undermine. That's what it literally means. Under the power of mind. All right. So we have a flood. Mankind comes out here, and then Noah is given a responsibility. This is human government, by the way. For every human government to be legitimate and to be real and to be fair, it has to do certain basic things. There was a death penalty. There was a law at that time. We have the law delineated and written down over here, but they had it back over there too. It didn't begin here. It began right back here. All the way over there, and they knew right and wrong. You're not supposed to steal. You're not supposed to lie. You're not supposed to cheat. You're not supposed to kill. You're not supposed to poke a guy's eye out and get mad at him, bust him in the nose and break his nose. You're going to get your nose broke. That's exactly what God said again over here. You bite his ear off, your ear's going to get chopped right off too. Same eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, all of that. You cut a man's hand off, your hand's going to get cut off. So that's a real deterrent to crime, isn't it? Wouldn't it?
One thing I'd always heard is actually the eye for an eye was limiting the retribution. Like, because other than that, the human nature would be like, someone poked your eye out, they'd want to go kill him.
Oh, his eyes. Well, it was justice. That's what it was. It was true justice. Well, God sets in what His true justice is. If you want to read all about 8:15 through 9:7, and one of the things they were supposed to do, they were supposed to do good and offer a blood sacrifice here again, but they also were supposed to scatter and multiply. What do you have in big cities? You have crowds of people, but what do people do to each other when they get together? That magnifies sin, doesn't it? Magnifies sin. So God knew that a way ahead of time. Now, as we studied over here, why is Satan going to be thrown in the bottomless pit? Come up out of the bottomless pit and then thrown into hellfire? Because he's unredeemable. That man's bad. He's going to be bad from now on. Why do people go to hell? Because they're unredeemable. Jesus Christ died for them, but it didn't work. It wasn't applied to their life. He was free, but it wasn't a fly. Okay? Well, Satan could even repent here if he really wanted to, but he's not going to. He's not going to. Well, people get mean when they get in crowds and they start using each other and they start doing some bad things. Well, they didn't scatter. God told them to spread out. If you go in there, trust me is what God said, and I will take care of you. You go out and you live a nomadic life. You know what the happiest people in the world basically have always been the sheep herders and the cowboys and the farmers. Think about it. It's hard work. All of it is. But they're happy. They're happy because they're seeing immediate results from their hands. All of this stuff. You don't have to worry about, 50 years from now I'm going to have a great big bank account and build this big palace and all this kind of stuff. You immediately see your log cabin. You see your children have food on their table and all of this stuff. And God said, if you do that, I'll take care of you. Just go out and just live out. Live a simple life and always believe in me. Why did God, now this is the reason, why did God bless the American Indian, the North American Indian, like He did? Because they did that. Why was there no disease in this country? Not even thorns and thistles hardly in this country. Because they were doing this simple thing. Simple. Simple, real simple. Okay? They believed. And they did this. That's why. And they were the happiest people. They were the most well-fed and the healthiest people in the world. What was Europe doing at this time? Building big cities and one prince over another. One prince over 10,000 peons or serfs. Isn't that what the way it was? For how many hundreds of years was it like that? And what do you have?
The Dark Ages.
You have the Dark Ages.
Plague.
And the plague and all that. Why? They didn't scatter. All right? Simple as that. They didn't scatter. Failure. All right, what was the judgment now? At this time. Now, you can study geology. When we go into this in the Bible in 8 ages, we're studying what we call archaeology, biblical archaeology. Now, we're kind of studying that right now, too, tonight. We're going to do this in 16 weeks. We're going to go through this chart and church history the best I can do it in 16 weeks, okay? I'm going to cram it in there. And I've got a slow start. But I know you're enjoying this. Are you learning something, David, this time? Now, how many times have I taught you this before? A lot. But you're beginning to learn. How about you, Irma? You heard it before, but it's starting to stick. Well, you hear it enough times, it sticks. All right, the judgment was. There's more than just the confusion of the languages. What else happened?
Slavery.
Well, slavery happened.
The Tower of Babel.
Tower of Babel. Go to the book of Genesis real quick.
Earthquakes.
There's
Yeah, chapter 11. All right. Right there is where all this took place. The whole earth used one language and used the same words, and they were there, and the Tower of Babel. All right. And what was God going to do? What was the judgment of this place? God said in verse 7, 11 to verse 7, "Come, let us go down and confuse their languages, that they may not understand one another's speech." So the Lord scattered them abroad over the faces of the whole earth. The faces of the whole earth.
What verse are you in?
That's plural. By the way, faces of the whole earth. That's verse number 8. And they stopped building the city. The city, the tower had already been built, by the way. It was a religious monument. They had one world religion, and they had a one world. We had a universal. This universal thing is always sinful. All right. That whole idea of universal, they was going to have a universal language and a universal religion, and it didn't have anything to do with God. So here we have another extreme example of false religion, don't we? So what did God do? He interceded. All right? He had truth, didn't he? Weren't they true people on the earth at that time? These were the sons of what?
Noah.
Of Noah, but they were the Zeth, the Shem, the line of Shem, wasn't it? Shem means name or monument, by the way. That's where God would raise up His name through Shem. Now, they didn't scatter, so He divided the earth. Now look down in verse number 18.
Chapter 11, verse 18.
Yeah, number chapter 11. All right. What's that name? What's that one name in there?
Peleg.
Peleg. By the way, that's where you get the word Pharisee. Pharisee. That word Pharisee comes from the word Peleg. It means divided. In Peleg's day, God divided the earth. All right? In Peleg's day, God divided the earth. I can't find the exact verse where it says that right now, but it says that in there someplace. Okay? In the days of Peleg, God divided the earth. I mean, this is when the continents drifted apart, except they drifted very fast. Now, what did they do? They built a great city and a great tower. Now, if the earth drifts apart and we have the continents, the origin of the continents now if you take a globe, and I should have brought a globe with me tonight, but if you take a globe, Dakota, what does a globe look like? You can see the different continents where they had fit together. And the original continent was called Gondwana or Pangaea. Okay? Pangaea means one earth. Earth was on one side, water was on the other side. Well, God divided the earth in those days. Now, when you have the earth dividing, you have great earthquakes, don't you? Now, God's judgment was triple actually here. For one thing, their language was confused. They couldn't understand each other, so they went out into different places where they understand the languages. Do you know that in the state of California there were over 3,000 languages among the Indians? There were over 3,000 tribes in California. In California. All right? Now, it didn't mean that they had some basic language roots there, but there were that many different languages. In some of the languages in the world, there is a masculine language and a feminine language. Men speak one language and the women speak another language in the same tribe, in the same group of people. Thank you, David. I didn't hear it at all. Did it click or... It clicked. It popped up, huh?
Well, it was
Or clicking?
clicking. Yeah.
Clicking. All right. Where was I? Among some people, there's a masculine and a feminine language, and we might still say that's going on today. But they really did have it back then. God confused the languages, but He also divided the earth. Now, why did God divide the earth? To get them apart. To separate them. Take them apart. When you have kids that are fighting, what do? Separate them. Simple as that. Isn't that real simple? We still do that today. It still works. So God separated them. And not only, but when the earth was being separated, there was a lot of shaking and a lot of earthquakes going on. What were they building their big cities out of back then? Mud and stone. Can you build a rock house when the earthquakes are happening? No. So they were dwelling in tents at this time. Just look at that now. They couldn't build their cities because the earth was shaking too much. Many, many cities were completely destroyed at this time. We have cities at the bottom of oceans. A lot of that happened during this period of time right here. The languages, and we have the earth divided. All right. Now we get to Abraham. God called out Abraham. All right. Abraham was only one. Now, if you go down here in the 11th chapter, you just keep on going down there, you see Serug, Noah, Peleg, and Reu, and Serug, and Nahor, Terah, and Terah lived at 70 years and became the father of Abram. There you have Abram. And also there was one over there that Haran became the father of Lot. There we have this poor little rich boy that never could get his act together, even though he was saved. Lot. And the Ur of the Chaldees. That's where they lived. Now, God called out Abraham and said, get out of here. I'm going to take you to the land that I'm going to show you. And it's going to be your land. Now, what happens in the Bible is really closely related and tied to everything else. Now, when Noah had 3 sons after the ark, remember, did I tell you last week about him getting drunk and things changing and everything else? He had one son that dishonored him and the other 2 sons didn't, and he cursed one of those sons. What was that son's name? It wasn't Ham, the direct son, but one of his descendants. His son was called Canaan. All right? Canaan. And they're the ones that founded the land of Canaan. Now, God promised Abraham, now go all the way back to Noah. Now, God set this curse upon those people because He knew what they'd be like. The foreknowledge of God. All right? So He said that He's going to call Abraham out now. And He said, I want you to dwell in Canaan land. He gave him the land. Canaan was His servant. These were the servants. Now, back in the early part of America, and this happened over here, this is really where it really began. This is when people were using slaves, and they were black slaves most of the time, or Indians. Both were dark. But they said all of the races that were cursed were dark. That was a curse that God put upon them, and they were all supposed to be slaves from then on. And there's where the origin of the Southern Baptists was. We were the ones from the South, okay? Southern Baptists, Northern Baptists, Southern Baptists. Southern Baptists believed in slavery. Well, one of the things that they did, they believed that the curse that was back here with Noah, when that son dishonored him, that's the curse upon the whole black race, but that's not what it's talking about. Those that were cursed were not the black people of Africa at all, but who? Canaan, the people that occupied and built the land of Canaan, all right, which is Palestine today. Now, God gave Palestine to Abraham. His name was Abram at that time, which meant exalted father. All right, his name was Abram. Now, God called him out, and He told him to dwell in Canaan land, but he went to Egypt. Now, when Jacob went down into Egypt, didn't he? He went back down there, and Joseph was sold into Egypt. And then he became like the number 2 Pharaoh there in the land. But he dwelt into Egypt. Well, because he went down into Egypt, Abraham did, that's why his sons, Jacob, were cursed, and they went down there, and they had become slaves for how many years? 400 years. It's all because of how Abraham failed God, and he dwelt in Egypt. So every part of the Bible is tied together. Now, when we come to church history, we're going to find a lot about the doctrines in the New Testament, how they much affect what God's people believe. And even this little book right here, why people don't and do believe it today. All right? Now, the Lord, in the 12th chapter of the book of Genesis, and the Lord said to Abram, go forth from your country and from your relatives and from your father's house. Now, people didn't do that back then. You stayed with your family. But He told them to get out of here and to the land which I'll show you, and I will make you a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. And I shall bless those who bless you. Now, I'm going to tell you something, people. This is still in effect today. This promise is still in effect today. I will bless those who bless you, and the one who curses you, I will curse. All right? And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. In you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. Who is this? This would be Jesus. All right? And it's the seed of the woman in Galatians 3:8. Somebody go to Galatians 3 and verse 8.
What verse were you reading from?
I was reading from Genesis 12 and verse 3. That's very important. Genesis 12 and verse 3. It's not on this chart here, but I'm adding this to it.
Galatians 3, what?
3 and 8.
Just, okay. In the scripture, foreseeing that God would justify the Gentiles by faith, preached the gospel to Abraham beforehand, saying, in you all the nations shall be blessed.
All right, who wrote that?
Paul.
Paul the Apostle wrote it by the inspiration of God, we know. And he's telling, God is preaching the gospel to Abraham. When did he do it? Right here in Genesis, the 12th chapter. Isn't this beautiful? See, the Bible is all like a puzzle, but it's integrated. When you pull on one, if you used to buy a sack of feed, if you pull on the right thread, the whole thing would unravel, wouldn't it? Well, if you correctly divide the Word of God, it'll all unravel and you'll understand it. If you don't, you're going to have a mess on your hands. You're going to be all messed up like Church of Christ and Catholicism and Seventh-day Adventurists and all the rest. All right? Okay, you're going to have some real adventures. And the Mormons and the Jehovah's Witnesses that say that they're Jehovah's Witnesses and they're Antichrists. They're not Jehovah's Witnesses at all. You get all messed up if you don't divide the Word of God correctly. Anyway, we have it. His failure was he dwelt in Egypt. He cursed his children because of that. All right? And the judgment was Egyptian bondage for 400 years. All right. That's where I'm going to quit for tonight. We got almost over here to the cross. See there? We're making it through history. All right. Are you enjoying it? Are you learning something? Hope I'm not boring you. You've been foundered a time or two. You know, sometimes they give you off more than you can chew, swallow, and digest at one time. But just hold on to it. You'll understand more about it by and by. Like I said, you can know a thing for a long time before you understand it. And I mean that. There's a time element to learning. It's good to have all of you here today. Well, if you got a couple of questions you want to ask me afterwards, you can do that. But I'm going to turn you back loose on the world. We've been in here for about an hour or close to it. I don't know, it may seem like 2 hours to you or 15 minutes. I don't know which one. But brother, what is your name? Mike. Brother Mike. I'm sorry I can't remember your name. You've been in my Sunday school classes and everything over. Mike, what is your last name? Compton. All right, Brother Mike. Would you dismiss us in prayer, please?